Hey, what's up, YouTube? My name is Mike, and I'm here sitting in my car. I just wanted to find a quiet place and give you my testimonial about how I came to believe in Jesus Christ. But more than that, I want it to be something for you. I'm not making this just to get my story out there. I'm making this so that you can use this to bolster your faith in some form or fashion, so that you can make sense of some of the other testimonials out there about heaven in particular. I want to talk about heaven. Long story short, I recently came to the realization that heaven is a very, very real place, and that it does exist. And as hard as it is to believe that, Jesus Christ, he's an amazing, whatever he was, he's amazing. And what he said, every last bit of it is true. So I recommend you read the Bible, of course, to see what it is that Jesus said and what it is that he promised. And in particular, if you look at the King James Version of the Bible, you'll see Jesus's words are written in red letters in some Bibles. And I would recommend that you focus on those red letters, because that's what I did, and that's the truth, and it's verifiable in lots of ways. But I will point out a few other testimonials, as well as a few other books, or just one in particular, the Book of Enoch, to help put my experience in perspective, and so that it will help you understand what, number one, what heaven is like, and number two, understand the experiences of other people who claim to have been there. There's a lot of course, debate and skepticism surrounding near-death experiences, and there's also a lot of interest, because the testimonials that people give are eerily similar, and they have certain core similarities in there. One thing to remember when you're listening to the points that I give is, you have to remember that even if two different people in two separate times go to a new place and they describe it, for example, if they both went to Disneyland and they were to describe what they saw, two separate people who've never met, and they went at separate times, even if what they specifically describe will be different, like they might have went on different rides, they might have seen different parts of the park, in general, there will be similarities. There will be undeniable similarities that will allow you to verify that, oh, okay, these two people are talking about the same place. For example, the entrance. They would both have to enter in through the entrance. They would both see famous monuments within Disneyland that that are hard to miss. And those, they would both explain that there are rides in Disneyland, and they might have different types of rides, but they would both explain the rides. They would both explain, the different types of candy shops or things that they might have seen. They might have been into different shops, but in general, they will be able to describe what the place is like. And in general, those are the similarities that you need to understand, and those are the similarities that you will see in other people's testimonials, to understand that heaven is a real place indeed. And basically, I don't know if I want to tell you my whole life story, make it a really long video, or just give you those pointers, but I think I'll just give you the pointers. And basically, the first thing you'll see after you die, if aside from the outer body experience and seeing your own body, and seeing you laying there lifeless, your soul will go to another place. And that other place... Okay, so point number one. The first thing that you can verify through near-death experiences that, people have seen is that you enter into heaven by first coming to a pitch dark place. It's a dark place. It's like, I like to call it the void. I think somebody else did too. I can't recall who, but it's like a dark room. It's almost as if you're in a room that has absolutely no light or windows whatsoever entering into the room. There's no door. There's nothing that could seep where light could seep in. There's no windows or cracks or anything. It's so dark in there, you cannot see. When I was there, I tried rubbing my eyes, note that I felt like I had a body. I felt like I was in a certain place. I felt my legs and my body and my eyes and my hands. And I started rubbing my eyes, but it didn't help anything. I thought something was wrong with my eyes. I was like, hey, why can't I see? But you literally... It's like, not that you can't see, but it's like you can only... It's like all you can see is black darkness. It's like you can see the darkness. It's so thick that the darkness... It's hard to explain, but again, this is the first thing that many near-death experience testimonials will talk about. Not only near-death testimonials, but I found later on that in the Book of Enoch, they also talk about this dark place. He calls it the dark and hollow places. You can Google it if you like. Enoch says, oh, how dark and hollow they are to look at. And Enoch claims that in the Book of Enoch, which is non-canonical, I understand, but that's not the topic that I want to talk about. Enoch describes this place as being a waiting room for people. And when I was there, I would hear people, whispering things to me from the back, from the sides, and I could hear them whispering things to me, and they weren't nice things. They were telling me things like Jesus is a lie, God is a lie. And at the time when I was hearing this, I really didn't have a concept of God and Jesus at the time. So I didn't really care what they were saying, and I ended up laughing at them. And then another thing you'll hear in a lot of near-death testimonies, and which was similar to mine, is how they transported from this place to another place. And usually, people will describe it in different ways, but the way I felt it was like I was being sucked up into a vacuum, sucked up into a huge vacuum, and I was kind of sucked up. And you can hear it. You can hear the whooshing sound, and all of a sudden, boom, I'm in a new place. I think there was a flash of light before I entered into the new place, but I can't be certain. It just happened so fast. Anyways, when I'm in this new place, all of a sudden the atmosphere of the entire room was different. Now people were all happy, and they were telling me nice things, and we were exchanging stories and sharing our stories, and they were sharing their stories with me, but it wasn't verbal. This is the second point, maybe the third after the vacuum, the whooshing, and going transporting to a new place. This would be the third similarity that you'll find in a lot of near-death testimonies. It's that when I was in this new place, it was almost as if we communicated telepathically. I didn't need to talk. I didn't hear any words. There weren't any human words, but every time I passed by a certain individual, I would know that individual. I would know him like I know my brothers and my close families. I would have an intimate, automatic and almost intimate understanding of who that person was, how they felt, and what their personality was like. And every time I met a new individual and got a download of their life and their experiences and their emotions, it was like hearing the funniest joke ever. And not to say that their lives are funny and everybody's life is a joke, but maybe, to God, it might be, like everything's pretty funny to him. They do say God has a sense of humor, so. But when I was there, I could see it through his perspective, and everything was so funny. And I know they felt the same way. They also felt it was funny. And a boy who wrote a book, his name is Alex Malarkey, he described it as hearing the best joke again and again and again and again. It's like every time you hear the next one, it's even better than the one before, and your just laughter is compiling and compiling exponentially. You're laughing so hard, but you don't feel any pain. Your stomach doesn't hurt because you're laughing so hard, so it just keeps going higher and higher and higher, and you just the laughter and the joy, the fun of it is really indescribable. It's really indescribable. But that's really I think the boy Alex Malarkey did the best in describing it as hearing the best joke again and again and again and again. Because the key thing about it was the laughter. After that, the next thing, that would be the fourth thing that you can find in near-death testimonies and that I experienced. And I'm not going into too much detail about everything I saw, because I would have just so much to say about this place, the vividness, the realness, the emotions. But the next thing that I saw was, and that you will be able to verify through a lot of other near-death testimonies, was that there were lights. Suddenly, I was in a place where it was like I was riding down roller coasters made of rainbow glowing neon lights that were tracks throughout the entire cosmos, the universe. It was like I was riding these lights throughout the universe and zipping so fast. And when you're on a roller coaster, you feel that rush because you're traveling so fast. You could feel that, and it felt like that I was a child and going down a slide of lights that was immense fun. It wasn't laughter fun, but it was a different kind of fun, but that was also fun. And you'll find a lot of people talk about these lights when they go to heaven and how they can transport through them. That's another thing. Another thing that I experienced was I saw, after I was traveling down these lights, is that many other people experienced. I'm not sure in what sequences these things happened, because there's like no sequence. It's like it's hard to tell where something began and where something ended. The only time there was an actual specific sequence was when I left the initial void, the dark place, to go to the good place. That was clearly two different sequences. And then once I was in the good place, I don't know how I went from the crowded room of good souls all the way to the lights, and then from the lights, at some point, I started hearing, this is another thing that you will hear in a lot of near-death testimonies and that will be verified, is that I started to hear music. And again, I really like the book written by Alex Malarkey. It's called The Boy Who Visited Heaven. I really like the way he explained it. He said it sounded like a bunch of songs that were combined and meshed together, except for it sounded perfect. It wasn't like any music of this world, but it was music nonetheless. What made it sound like music was that there was almost a tempo, a rhythm, and a beat to it. Kind of like, to me, it sounded like a bunch of household appliances that were almost kind of like banging and clamoring together, like a washing machine, a dryer, and full of clothes, and all of these things were kind of banging and clamoring together in unison, in a rhythm, so that it created a musical beat. And then there was a tone almost that kind of enveloped all of that, and Eben Alexander, who's some neurosurgeon who also claims to have visited heaven, calls it a crescendo of music. There are a few other testimonials that I saw that explained it in a similar fashion, but yeah, that's what it kind of was. And then what a crescendo is when the music gets gradually louder and louder, and then quieter and quieter. It's when you give emphasis to a certain part of a song and it gets louder, you kind of play the notes stronger. And that's kind of what it was. Almost slowly it would get louder, and then quieter, like almost a soft breathing. When you take a breath and you inhale, it gets louder and louder, and once you exhale, it gets quieter and quieter. And the sound that this music was just, when you heard it, it was perfect, is what Alex Malarkey described it as. It was just enveloping my whole body, and the music was going through my entire being, and I was a part of that music almost. Who knows, how that music was being played or made, but it felt like I was a part of the music, and it was indescribable, and again, indescribable, but the best music, best experience with music that you can ever expect or anticipate to have. And that's another thing that's a core similarity that you'll hear in near-death testimony. So you'll see the void. Okay, in the void there are different types of voids. Some people will have meet bad people in this void, because in the Book of Enoch he explains that there are different hollow places, there are different voids for different types of people, and he calls it the waiting room where the souls of men will gather. So now, after having read the Book of Enoch and looking back on that experience, I realized, okay, that's why it was like that. That's why I was zoomed from one place to another. And there are different parts of the void. There are four specific waiting rooms where they're all kind of like the void. One is for the good people, one is for the bad people, one is for the people who were killed, or their life ended kind of in bad terms, but it wasn't necessarily their fault. So there's a separate void for them, and there's a separate void for the different types of people, but essentially it divides to good and bad. The second thing you'll see is you'll meet other individuals where, okay, I can't speak to hell, but if you get to heaven, and I pray to God that you do. If you're watching this video, I pray to God that you do. That the second thing that you'll see is that there's like a telepathic communication between people, and when you do those exchanges, it's also one of the most indescribable joys that you can experience. The third thing was the lights. You travel down lights, and the lights are amazingly bright and glowing and vivid, and they're huge. It's like if I'm riding on a roller coaster of lights, clearly, or a roller coaster of a rainbow, it's clearly that these lights are going to be everywhere. And I'm riding on them. I was very small in comparison to the rainbow in a whole, as if to the left of me was the blue color, to the right of me was a gold color, but I was riding down, I remember, a red color. I was riding down a red color, but I could see the blue and the gold and the yellow and the green beside me, because those were maybe other parts, I don't know, but the lights were just zipping through everywhere, and it was taking me places, and the lights were amazing. It's the best thing, again, indescribable, but anyways, after the lights, again, another thing that you'll see in near-death testimonies that they will describe to you, and if it's a true near-death testimony, then you will see them talk about it, would be the music. They will hear the music, and many people like to call it the choir of the angels, the trumpets of God, and the music of God, or them chanting and hymning and giving praise to God Almighty. And maybe that's what it was, because I do remember when I was hearing this music, at the end of the lights, there was a big glowing orb, a white glowing big like sun almost, and it was shining brightly, and there were smaller lights with trails that would circle around the orb, hundreds of thousands of them everywhere, kind of circling around this orb. And then I became one of those, and as we circled around the orb, that's when the music was the best. The music was becoming a part of me, and that's when I could really experience the music itself and felt like I was a part of the music. And as we were circling around the orb, you would hear the, and it was amazing. It was amazing. The last thing, after all of that, there is another thing that many people describe in their near-death experiences. It was a garden. That's how people explain it. That's how I saw it. A garden or a pasture. It was like I forget what that word is, but there's a word for those little hills that you see. I saw once when I was driving through Colorado. They're like green hills that aren't, that are connected one to another, and they're not really high. They're not mountains, but they're just green hills, lush green hills. And I was in this place. It was just like Earth almost, and except for it was perfect. There was nothing wrong. There wasn't a single dead grass. Every single blade of grass was perfectly green, almost glowing, and I think there were some flowers around in the green as well. Those were also perfect. Not a single piece of the flower was even wrinkled or in the wrong place. It's hard to describe, but it looked perfect. And there was a blue sky above. I think there were some small clouds, but when I was taken to this new garden, my attention was immediately focused on a red slide that was at the center of the hills. It was in just the middle of nowhere, kind of just a red slide. It looked brand new. Like, it was so new that the slide was glistening. It was a red slide at the time. I was a young kid, and going on slides was one of the funnest things that I'd experienced as a kid. And Jesus says that there are treasures in heaven, and that you should gather your treasures in heaven. Maybe that's, it felt like it was for me. It was like a gift for me. I knew it was for me. There was nobody else in the garden, just me. And I was going down that slide like multiple times. It was just as fun as riding those red lights, because it was fun, less exciting, but more peaceful in this place. And I was having so much fun, just enjoying it. And then my vision or dream was over, and I came back to reality. I woke up, and I tried to explain this dream to my mom at the time, and she was like, "Oh, okay, that's nice, dear. You had a nice dream." And I got so frustrated because she wasn't comprehending the magnificence, the magnitude of this experience. And I wanted to know, has she ever had a similar dream like this? Has she ever experienced anything like this? I wanted to know, but I couldn't explain the dream to her at that young age. I just couldn't, and I couldn't verify that with her, so I had to kind of just let it go. Over the next maybe 10 years, I would go to sleep every night trying to have that dream again and again. And 10 years, literally every night, I would try to have that dream again. You know how when you have a good dream, you want to have it again. You think about it before you go to sleep, and you try to kind of recite it in your brain, and try to get there. But never again did I have any kind of dream similar to this. Anyways, to bring my story to a close, those are the key points that you can look to in near-death testimonies to find out if they're actual near-death testimonies, and also if just to just to see for yourself, like, hey, yeah, you know, these different guys have clearly been to a similar place that is out of this world. And yes, I did see it in a dream. Who knows, my breathing might have stopped when I was sleeping as a young kid. I don't know how I got there. I do not know why I was there. Well, maybe I know why, but I don't know how I got there. After, you know, 10 years of unsuccessfully trying to have that dream again and again and again, eventually I grew up and I gave up. You know, I considered it was a dream. It got pushed back into my subconscious and into my memories, essentially, and that was that. I kind of, to a certain degree, expected that everybody had this dream. Maybe everybody did as a kid, they just don't remember. I don't know. But anyways, I forgot the dream and went about my life, went into the world, and became gradually a bad person, essentially. My faith was not particularly strong, even though I did believe in God and I did believe in praying. I don't think I ever really believed in the Bible or Jesus. But about 5 years ago, my wife got really sick. It was a really hard time for me. I don't want to go too deep into it because I'll probably start crying. But long story short, she got really sick, and at the bookstore or the visitor center in the hospital, I came upon a book written by Alex Malarkey, the individual I mentioned several times throughout this video. And this kid is a kid who was in a severe fatal car accident, and he claims to have visited heaven, and he went through a miraculous recovery. He also claims to have had certain experiences that were paranormal, and that angels visited him during his recovery, even told him things that he was not able to know, or that essentially, and Jesus showed while he was in his recovery. He was in a coma, and he saw heaven and he saw Jesus and whatnot. And I came upon this book. It was called The Boy Who Visited Heaven. And while my wife was dying, I read the book, and in the book, most of it is about his life and how before he got into the accident, what he was like, and how he was recovering, and the miraculous recovery. Most of the book is about the miraculous recovery that he made and the paranormal activities that took place throughout that recovery. However, within the book, there are a few pages that are excerpts. And the book is kind of told from the boy's father's perspective, but the boy has a few pages in the book where he describes what he saw as heaven in his dream. And he claims to have seen Jesus. I didn't see any of that, but he claims to have seen Jesus. He claims to have seen God, and seen a lot more than I have. He claims that there's in a lot more descriptive detail, and he was much more able to see in more detail than I was, more of heaven than I have, so you got to keep that in mind too. It's probably, I think now that it's almost like I was allowed to, visit the outer parts and, the essential parts of Disneyland, kind of. Like, I had a short stay, whereas his stay was much, much longer. And anyways, it wasn't until I read that book while my wife lay in the hospital bed with a terminal illness and, grasping at her last moments in life, or so it seemed to be, that it wasn't until I read that book that I would realize what that dream was, and, what it was. And I couldn't believe it. You might not believe what I'm telling you, but, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe that dream that I had was a vision of heaven, essentially, and an experience of heaven. And that's what it was, and I still can't wrap my mind around it completely. And when I realized that, and the flashbacks of my dream hit me as I was reading through his excerpts, my faith was the hope was instilled in my heart, and I kneeled down and I prayed to God. I asked him, hey, if you're there, if you're really there, that I promised, I asked him, I begged him for another chance. And I asked him, if you give me my wife back, I will dedicate my life to you, and I will do right by her a second time around. And thank God, she's back. She's good now. It took a while, 2 weeks of her to come out of the coma and slowly regain her ability to talk, walk. She was essentially, her brain was wiped clean after this experience, and she had to relearn everything. It came back pretty quickly, but over 2-3 years time, we're pretty much back to normal now. And it's been about 5 years since all of that happened. And I knew that's kind of why I'm making this video today, because I know I have to do something. I'm not a pastor or a priest or anything like that, but in my little way, this is what, if sharing what I've experienced helps anybody, strengthen their belief in God and heaven and Jesus in any little way, that's what I can do. I go around telling other people this testimony. They don't really believe me. I don't think they do, but and I don't think they have the time to verify all of the points that I made. But again, I'll make those points again. If you look at near-death experience testimonies, you will find those key similarities in there. People will go to the void. It's in the Book of Enoch, also scripture quoted in the Book of James, and you will see lights. You will hear the music. You will hear the joy. You will be able to telepathically communicate. There will be no sense of time. There will be a garden, and there will be treasures for you in that garden. And I guess that's it, and how far that goes, and what happens after that, I honestly don't know. But those are the key things that everybody will experience should they be blessed enough to be allowed through the gates of heaven. And verily he has said unto us that he is the way, he is the truth, he's the life. The sheep will hear his voice, and to the porter, and to him the porter openeth the door, and he will lead his sheep through that door unto green pasture. Thanks for taking the time to listen through my unorganized testimonial, but I hope that you'll remember those key points. You'll take a few moments out of your day and you'll research a couple near-death experiences, and you'll look for these points in other people's testimonies. And when you hear them talk about it, hopefully you'll see that there's a lot of people talking about it, and everybody who's been there is definitely going to describe it in a similar way, and hopefully you'll know that we're all talking about the same place. And that's it. God bless you. I love you all. I hope to see you again.